I've been working hard for more than 6 hours now, my friends, and still no lunch has been served. But finally, our caterer has served up a meal. I can't wait to see what delicious treats are waiting under here. But first, let's talk about a very annoying aspect of time tracking for on-set crew, managing meal breaks. So here's another video for all you hardworking people on set and at the production office. And today's topic is meal breaks and meal penalties. Meal penalties. Some love them, some hate them. You always have to double check what your crew has submitted and if that info is correct. And do meal penalties even apply? And if so, how many and how much are they worth? Day after day, week after week, time card after time card. And how often have you asked yourself, why is there no easier way to handle these annoying little fellows? Well, now there is, my friends. With Yamdo's time cards, you can not only automate meal penalty tracking, you can even automate all calculations with flexible settings. Please watch till the very end, as there are ways to show you how to even reduce or even avoid meal penalties. So let's get started. First of all, what even is a meal penalty and how does it occur? For that purpose, I have actually built my meal penalty or MP meter. So here you can basically see the two potential meals, meal 1, meal 2 for each shooting day. Shooting day 1, shooting day 2, shooting day 3, etc., etc. So potentially we have sometimes called lunch, and dinner. Sometimes it's also called the AM shift versus the PM shift. But for our purposes, let's just stick with meal 1 and meal 2. And in many, many labor agreements, it means that there is a required meal start time. So for example, that could be you should serve the first meal no later than 6 hours after this person has actually started working. Now, for the exact regulations, please check your labor agreement, check in with a payroll specialist. What we show here today are just examples. Now, to actually work now with meal penalties, I have prepared some wonderful little meal penalties for us. Meal penalty marshmallows. Aren't they cute? So here we go. All those colored little marshmallow meal penalties. So this is a collection of meal penalties. And as you can already see, there are different colors here and there are different price tags. So the white ones are worth $7.50. In my case, the yellow ones are $10. The next one's $12.50. Then again, $12.50 and actually $25 for the pink ones. So basically, you can already think of a meal penalty as something where you kind of collect little tokens, and each token has a different value. Well, again, if the production serves a meal too late. Now, let's say for meal number 1 on my first shooting day, we're supposed to start, let's say, meal 1 or lunch at 12 o'clock. But it's, let's say, 12:20, so we're 20 minutes late. So basically, it also matters like the interval, how long it is, or the duration that you have to wait until you get your meal, and which means how long too late, how much too late it actually is. And let's say in our case, we measure in a way that each meal penalty occurs for each 30-minute interval, for each half an hour that the meal is actually served late. So in this case, if we are between 12 and 12:30, again, 12 is our required meal 1 start time, we would actually collect 1 meal penalty. So let's do this. So I take here a white one, a white marshmallow, 1 meal penalty, MP1, because this is for my AM shift. All right? So let's say production is really going on, and the director and the DOP are shooting, and meal 1 is still not served. It's not only half an hour, it's already getting into the next interval, like maybe let's say 45 minutes late. So that's already in the second 30-minute interval. So in this case, we actually get a yellow one. So we get another meal penalty here. And maybe it even goes on and on and on, and we actually collect a third meal penalty because we're up to 1.5 hours late, which means 3 times 30-minute interval late. And this gives us actually 3 meal penalties for meal 1. So let's say this is a very, very long day. We already have collected for our lunch 3 meal penalties because it was almost 90 minutes late until it was served. But the production really doesn't get it, right? So even at the second meal in the evening, for example, we are again late. And let's say we are like up to 60 minutes, so that means up to 2 30-minute intervals in our case, late. So we get 1 and then again 2 meal penalties, a white one and a yellow one. Now you see that here I'm basically repeating the colors. So even on one day, it's not kind of that I continuously go through all the meal penalties in this very order. No, I basically for each kind of meal, in this case the meal 1, in this case the meal 2, on the same shooting day, I basically restart with my meal penalties. And that's also the same, let's say, for the second day of shooting here. Again, for meal 1, we are again half an hour late, but thank God it's only half an hour this time. We would again start with this white meal penalty with the $7.50. And the same, of course, like during our entire week, let's say on the first, second, third, on the fourth day of shooting, we are also again late for meal 1, and we would take 1 meal penalty also here. So that's basically how you keep collecting meal penalties throughout 1 week. So you might have asked yourself that all those fellows have price tags, but there are also the big ones, the big chunks here, and they don't have a price tag. Well, there are also meal penalties under certain circumstances that come with kind of a dynamic price tag, which is related to the hourly rate. So it can be a bit more complicated than this, but we will come to this later. So now I think it's time to take a closer look on like how meal penalties are actually used within time cards. And for that purpose, let's actually jump into Yamdu. Let's go. So actually here I'm in the time card of Casper Cavetti. Here's our gaffer on set. We will talk about some of those columns later, like NDB or meal grace, what all that means. But let's now focus first on the meal. By the way, you can always enter your times, like your work start, your work end, your meal times in different time formats, like the AM PM format, like the 24-hour format, the military format, and also in decimal hours. So in this particular case, I want to say, all right, the meal 1 start time is maybe 2 p.m. to 2:30, but then the meal end time, I might want to switch to 2:15. Now, as you can see, it shows me already a warning because also the duration matters. Yes, so for this user, it should be 30 minutes. And so I switch this back. So I have like 2 to 2:30, 30 minutes, not only 15 minutes, and everything is fine again. Now, what I can also do is I can have this person, Casper, start later, like with meal 1 start, by 15 minutes. And as you can see, there's not only the warning, which we can eliminate real quickly by giving him the full 30 minutes, but obviously we now have 1 meal penalty at $7.50. Now, where does this come from? Let's take a look at Casper's payroll and labor agreement settings. Let's scroll down to the meals. So meal 1 is always activated. And of course, you could say, is the meal 1 paid? Counts as work time? The default, of course, is no. Usually you're off the clock when you're having lunch. And let's say it's 30 minutes. It could be 45 minutes, could be 60 minutes. For Casper here, it's 30 minutes. And it says required meal 1 start time is 6 hours after in this case, his work start. What actually does it mean to get meal penalties and how are they displayed in Yamdu? First of all, here down you have to enable meal penalties and you also have to select an interval. The interval here could be 30 minutes, like in our example. Of course, it could also be 15 minutes or whatever setting you prefer here. Well, prefer is maybe not actually right. It really depends on, of course, the labor agreement. And if you're not sure about all those things, then please check in with a payroll specialist. But when you know the rules, you can simply enter like the rates. Now, here, pay attention, it's a standard rate because this project is a standard film. If it's, for example, studio productions, maybe you want to differentiate because maybe higher rates apply. Now, if you click on custom, you can actually enter a value. Here I have set exactly the same values as we have them here. But for example, I could also say the fifth interval does not apply at all. Or I switch it back as it was to $25. Now, you can also see here that it says from the fifth interval onwards. So basically in Yamdu, you can differentiate between the first 5 intervals, and then obviously it will just take the same value from the fifth interval onwards. So let's save here and just take a look what that actually means in a time card. So here I already have one meal penalty. Now let's do something else. I switched the meal 1 start to 2:45 p.m. and then meal 1 end to 3:15. And this already gives me 2 meal penalties. So you see like one for $7.50 plus the $10 for the second interval. And by the way, you can always see all the meal penalties for an entire weekly batch down below here. And it's 3 in total because here on Wednesday, we also already have 1 meal penalty. There are also ways to kind of, well, avoid meal penalties. Leads to NDBs and the grace. So let's go to the settings again and take a look at what an NDB actually means. And here we have enabled for Casper the non-deductible break, NDB. As you can see, there is no choice. It always counts as work time in this case, so you stay on the clock. Well, that's why it is called non-deductible. And then we could, for example, say the required NDB end time, so you have to have had your NDB within 2 hours after work start. So what does this actually mean? So an NDB, a non-deductible break, sometimes people also say non-deductible breakfast, which is not 100% correct, but usually it's actually what they do because it's usually for team members that get a pre-call time. So they usually arrive earlier on set than the actual crew call time. For example, think of like rigging crew or makeup and hair or people that have to prepare a lot. So they start earlier than most of the rest of the crew. Well, this would mean you have like a lot of different meal 1 breaks for different crew members, depending on if they had a regular call or a pre-call time. And you don't want this. You want basically most of your team members to really have the meals together at the same time, which is also a lot easier from a logistical perspective. Now, what this actually means is with an NDB, you enable those people that have started earlier to get a decent meal, like, for example, within 2 hours of their work start time. So let's say they started at 6 o'clock in the morning. So if you provide them with an NDB before 8 o'clock in the morning, which is then maybe already the regular crew call, then basically this NDB counts against the meal penalties, which we will see in a second. Now, remember, like NDB means they really have a chance for 15 minutes or something, or 30 minutes, depending, of course, on the regulations, to really have a decent meal, like, for example, some scrambled eggs and bacon and a bagel and so on and so on. It's not like just a quick snack, like a candy bar or something. It really needs to be in that case, for example, a real true breakfast. So in this case, my work start is 8 o'clock in the morning, right, for this day. But let's maybe go to Wednesday. There we have our work start, let's say at 7. Should have switched the personal call as well, but in this case, let's say it's just a work start. And we have like 2:15 our PM, our meal 1 start, and that gives us 3 meal penalties. So in this case, we want to say at 9 o'clock, we basically end the NDB, and this eliminates our meal penalties. Now, why is that? Because it actually resets the counting, like of the required hours until you have to actually serve meal 1 for this person by the end of the NDB time. So that's how you can set rules for NDBs, and then basically a crew member usually just has to enter the NDB end time, and Yamdu does all the calculations automatically. Now, the other thing to potentially avoid meal penalties is grace or extension. So let's take a look at this at the settings. And again, of course, we need to scroll down to meal settings. And in this case, we say, all right, we want to enable or say grace is applicable, actually. So you might ask yourself, well, how does now extension and grace really work? And can a production just deliberately call grace and keep on shooting? No, of course not. Usually the head of departments or the crew agree on, okay, let's just keep shooting and finish this one setup. Let's call grace or extension. Now, what this means is basically the time is still ticking. Your required meal start time is as it is, and it's just getting pushed and pushed and pushed. Now, what Yamdu actually does with those settings is comparing if like the real meal start time has been within this grace or extension period that just gets added to the meal start time. Now, as we can see here, of course, in those labor agreement settings here in Yamdu, different agreement settings might occur for a particular crew member. So it really depends on the particular crew member and the actual time that meal has been served, if meal penalties occur, or if we were able to avoid them just by the grace or extension rule according to these settings. But let me just put this again back to 2:15 as a start time and 2:45 as a meal 1 end time. And that gives us 1 MP, right? Because we are starting at 8, we should have served dinner at 2, but it's 15 minutes late. Now, I activate grace, and grace was set to 20 minutes. So basically with 2:15, I'm still within the 6 hours plus grace time. So grace helps me to actually eliminate this meal penalty. Now, concerning grace and extension, it might be a great idea to also take a look at the daily time card view, because usually if I take a look here for the 7th of May, I want to see, like, for in my entire lighting and grip department, have they had like grace or extension. And in this case, it already looks strange because within the same department for the very same day, some said grace yes, Casper and Bob, but the other ones said no. So you can easily correct this if you have like the accounting access rights, that is, and just multi-select like some of your crew members and say, okay, let's all put them to grace. And you can see for many it has eliminated the meal penalties, and of course for others reduced them. And I can also say no, there was no grace. And then obviously I have again an increase of meal penalties. So for grace and extension, I think it's a very good thing to also take a look at the daily time card view. So now let's do something else, something really mean. We just take away the meal 1 start times and of course also the end times and all meal times actually for the entire days of Monday and Wednesday. And as you can see here, this creates a real jump because now all of a sudden we have 11 meal penalties on Monday and 12 meal penalties on Wednesday. Of course, if we go down to the batch details, we see always the total meal penalties up to date in this current shooting week. And here we have 23 meal penalties worth $631.04. But let's again take a closer look at Monday versus Wednesday, because on Monday you can see I have 11 meal penalties, right, worth $200 and something. And then on Wednesday, I have 12 meal penalties, but all of a sudden they're worth more than $400. So kind of twice as much, right? How can that be? Well, that's because we have been hitting the weekly threshold. So if production just goes on and on and on and keeps creating meal penalties for the crew, it's getting expensive. So let's go to the settings for the weekly meal penalty threshold. So here it's set to a threshold of 20 meal penalties, which means that for this particular crew member in 1 week of shooting, we exceed 20 meal penalties, like throughout all days together, right? And that actually means it triggers another kind of price tag for such consecutive meal penalties. So that's actually where those big ones occur, right? So those big fat meal penalties. It triggers another price tag. And the price tag here can be, for example, the hourly rate. So let's assume Casper's hourly rate is $50. That would mean like each consecutive meal penalty beyond the weekly threshold is all of a sudden worth $50. Or it can even be the hourly rate with the currently applicable factor. So if you ask yourself, what does factor mean? I'm talking about the overtime factors if this crew member is already running into overtime while we hit the weekly threshold of meal penalties. Now, there is a dedicated video about overtime calculations. You can find the link down below in the description. But now, for this tutorial, let's just assume this particular factor in the overtime I'm in right now, or Casper is in right now, is 1.5x. That would mean, like with an hourly rate of $50 times 1.5x, this meal penalty jump would be actually worth $75 for each interval. So, again, meal penalties can become quite expensive if you don't pay attention. The good thing is that, as you can see, Yamdu tracks it all for you and does the calculations for you as well. All right, so now let's talk about the walking meal. So the walking meal is related to meal 2. So I'm going to scroll to the very right here. And of course, it depends on your previous meal 1 end time and if there is a required meal 2 start time. However, maybe the production says, well, you know, we're going to wrap in a couple of minutes anyways. So do you really need a sit-in meal? Or is a walking meal enough? So that's basically the concept of the walking meal. Usually a meal break is considered to be a sit-in meal or a kind of hot meal or sit-down meal. So you can literally sit down and enjoy dinner or lunch. However, a walking meal is supposed to be something like a sandwich, a wrap, something you can take with you. Well, it could be okay to serve a walking meal, but then it depends on when your actually wrap time is. So when is your work end? Because otherwise, again, meal penalties would occur, as you can imagine. Well, here I have the meal 2 start at 8:30 and the meal 2 end at 9 p.m. If it would be a sit-down meal, that is. But I turned it into meal 2 as a walking meal, yes. And the work end is 9 p.m. But you saw that I just switched the setting to 15 minutes of maximum duration that is allowed until you have to finish your work, until work end has to occur from meal 2 start time. And in this particular case, I'm 15 minutes over. So that means that one interval, a meal penalty, actually occurs. Now, if I go back to Casper settings, and here to the payroll and labor agreement, and I kind of switch again to 30 minutes of maximum interval and save it, confirm, Yamdu recalculates the time card, and the meal penalty is gone. Why? From 8:30 p.m. as a meal 2 start time until 9 p.m. as the required work end time is not more than or maximum 30 minutes, which is actually fulfilled, and that's why we do not have to pay a meal penalty, even though meal 2 was not a full sit down or sit-in meal. It was just a walking meal, but we were able to do this because we were able to wrap and send people home early enough within the walking meal maximum duration time. All right, that was some exhausting stuff. It's time to eat. And I cannot even count how overdue this is. So let's see what our beloved catering department has prepared for me, right? And it's marshmallows. Well, marshmallows and actually a pile of cash. That's how easy it is sometimes. I might go home hungry, but at least I made some dough. All right, but now I really want to try those little fellows here. And I have here my special equipment to actually do so. Wonderful. Doesn't it look delicious? All right, my friends. If you think this was useful, please drop a like and leave a subscribe. And always remember, she works hard for the money.